From South Carolina Public Radio, this is the South Carolina Lede. I'm your host, Gavin Jackson, and this episode was recorded on November 13th, 2025 from South Carolina Public Radio Studios here in Columbia. This episode of the Lede takes place less than a year away from election 2026.
2026 watch.
And in fact, we are less than 7 months away from June, which is when we'll see the primaries for several big positions on the ballot, including the governor's race and other state constitutional officers. So as we continue our look at election 2026, as well as the latest major news out of Washington, including the end of the federal government shutdown and much more, we have some of our favorite friends of the pod on. AP national politics reporter Meg Kinnard and South Carolina Public Radio Statehouse and political reporter Maayan Schechter.
Where's Miss Schechter been?
And where have you been? You can be a friend of the pod too. Jump on the wind down, 803-563-7169. We really want to hear from you guys. We really need to hear from you. It's the holiday season. Honda days are coming. We got the December to Remember sales event right around the corner. I need to hear from you guys. Also, we'll be having a live taping in the Low Country in December. Stay tuned, folks. Remember, December. 803-563-7169. What's on your Christmas list? So I wanted to have this conversation for you last week as we were officially a year away from election 2026. But scheduling issues being what they are, we didn't have a chance to make that work with our guests because Meg was in Washington, full disclosure, okay? However, we are here now with our friends of the pod, AP national politics reporter Meg Kinnard and South Carolina Public Radio Statehouse and political reporter Maayan Schechter. We are simply 51 weeks away from election 2026, but we know the primary is where all the fun happens in June, so be aware of that. Keep that on your calendar. But also, major news this week, the federal government is officially reopened after 43 days of being shut down. And I opened my conversation on This Week in South Carolina by asking Meg about the votes to make this happen and how that may shift some of the fortunes following the Democrats' sweep the week prior in several off-year elections. Take a listen, folks.
Really, what it came down to was 8 members of the Senate who traditionally have voted with Democrats, 7 of whom are Democrats and 1 independent, really coming up with this agreement to go and vote with Republicans to pass this measure, to bring everything coming forward in that chamber. And there's been a lot of blowback, basically, from a lot of Democrats who are unhappy with this. But from the 8 members who were kind of part of this nucleus that was able to get the deal moving forward, they were saying, it's time for this to be over. We're hearing from our constituents, listing off all the benefits that Americans haven't been able to get during the shutdown. And it really, when you look at all of this and put it in context, it really has kind of shown, at least for a lot of folks looking at this and analyzing it from the outside, Democrats really didn't end up getting a whole lot more than what they said that they had initially been offered in the very, very beginning. What they got was an agreement to, yes, fund the government temporarily, kind of kicking the can down the road a little bit, and also have a conversation about the health care subsidies that were kind of really, to begin with, the whole debate that Democrats were upset over. So it was these 8 members who agreed to vote with Republicans on the contingency that they would have this further conversation about the health care subsidies that began the whole thing, but also has kind of given us a peek into the latest iteration of the Democratic family feud, kind of in terms of where the disagreements still are, even though the shutdown is ending. And in general, people are happy about that.
When it comes down to it, we're talking about the Democrats essentially caving into the demands here to get things going again. Do we really think that there's going to be some viability to these discussions about the future of healthcare? It seems like it was just, okay, we'll see what happens in January when this stopgap funding expires again and we're back to the drawing board again. Do we really think something's going to happen here with healthcare?
That's very much what we're hearing from a lot of Democrats in the House and beyond, saying, well, they've said that they'll reopen the conversation about this, but how do we know that we as Democrats are really going to be able to advance these issues in a way that we wanted to begin with and that would help our constituents and Americans writ large? And so it's still theoretical at this point. It's unknown how, that conversation will go when it is reopened. And certainly there are plenty of people who are looking forward to that debate, which, as you note, is going to be dragging into 2026, which will be an election year when all of these members of the House are going to be on ballots and many of the senators. And so I think that we can continue to see, even though the shutdown has ended, a lot of the conversation about the issues that began it and dragged on through it are probably going to be taking us into the midterm elections.
Maayan, Senator Lindsey Graham was in town this week. He's teeing up what sounds like a forthcoming debate about health care, like we're talking about possibly in December, January 2026. It sounds like we're talking about a pretty heavy lift here. So I'm wondering, like, what did he have to say on the matter, and like how realistic is this actually going to be, like we're talking about here?
Right. Well, first, I think the big thing is that he opposes the extension of those Obamacare subsidies, which obviously a lot of Democrats were calling for and still want. But he talked about wanting a broad health care debate, something where a program is more sustainable, affordable, better outcomes, perhaps putting more money back to the actual Americans. And he also argued that Obamacare did not lower premiums. But, again, to Meg's point, we're heading into an election year. We haven't exactly seen Congress have the ability perhaps to do a kind of full-sail debate on a really big policy. Yeah. And we just watched a government shutdown for 43 days. So, hate to say never, but I think that there are a lot of complications that maybe spell out what the future could look like on a debate like that.
What I'm wondering too, and this will come with time, but when people start seeing these premium increases, which they already are, and when you start seeing these subsidies going away permanently or however they're going to be, I mean, that's affecting Americans. I mean, that's Democrats, Republicans, Independents. Like, people rely on these things, and when they start seeing this health insurance skyrocketing, and we have people now going to the ER emergency rooms again as their primary care providers, we're back to pre-Obamacare, essentially, and we have this problem again. So it's going to be interesting to see once that really starts influencing the debate, I would think.
Right. I think it's going to take constituents in these respective districts of senators or House members to actually speak up and say that this is deeply impacting them. And it can't just be Democrats. It has to be Republicans, too. We're going to have to see perhaps more town halls where this issue comes up. But it's obviously going to take that ground level sort of grassroots voice, I think, to maybe sway at least that conversation at all.
And there's already a conversation happening among people who are spinning forward to the midterms and saying, even if Democrats at this point don't get exactly what they're arguing, what they want, legislatively speaking, it's going to be a really good campaign issue for them going into the midterms, going into those town halls and being able to say to the voters that they're asking to send them back to Washington, we've been arguing for this the whole time. What have my Republican counterparts, what have they been doing? And so even if it doesn't come out in the wash this time, there's an argument that it's going to be good for Democrats in the elections.
Along 2026. But Meg, when we're talking about the House reopening now, they're back at work after 43 days. They haven't been there since September. We saw an explosion of emails from the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein come out from the House Oversight Committee on Wednesday. Congresswoman Nancy Mace is one of several Republicans pushing for a vote to release all those files despite pushback from the White House. A tricky spot for her to be in since she is a gubernatorial candidate. So what's the latest with those emails coming out, and how do you think this will affect maybe the race in South Carolina?
There's been so much conversation about the emails. I feel like every political person that we've been in front of for months, one party or the other is talking about release the emails. What are the emails? We've got more emails coming from this committee or that committee. But at stake right now is this discharge petition in the House, which if there are 218 members signed onto it, then that will advance it. And the petition is saying to release everything. DOJ, FBI, what do you have on this entire investigation? Release everything. And there are several Republicans who have signed onto this discharge petition, Nancy Mace being one of them. And we had reporting yesterday with the AP on how there have been some attempts at conversation between Nancy Mace and the White House, as well as some of these other members, including Colorado Representative Lauren Boebert, who we understand has met with officials at the White House to discuss her support of this discharge petition. And so the theory is, the move is to try to get some of these Republicans who have said that they support this petition to take their names off, and so then therefore it would not be able to advance through the House into the Senate and beyond. But the overall conversation about a lot of this is the theory of, why wouldn't the White House want any of this released? What is the point? Why would the White House be going to these Republicans who have voiced their support and ask them to remove? What do they have to hide? Why wouldn't they want this full transparency? And so at stake here in the gubernatorial race in South Carolina, because it does always come back to politics, you have Nancy Mace, who is this candidate who clearly has been in the race for quite some time now, and has often talked about sexual assault and her own experience as a sexual assault survivor, now being supportive of releasing information in this sexual assault case. And so from a political perspective for her, that does remain very on brand with a lot of what she has been sharing of her personal story into her campaign. But also in the Republican primary debate, when they're trying to all get support from the White House as they move forward through the primary into the general election, it's an interesting nexus when you look at all of those pieces together. And we'll see how the petition does, whether it moves through the House and into the Senate and beyond there, and what happens with the rest of the files and the emails. But it certainly does make it interesting to watch here in South Carolina.
Yeah, we are back full force here, coming back to D.C. and everthing just like spinning right back up. Like,
all at once.
It went from being very quiet to like
Right.
just a tornado right now.
For
But
sure.
Meg, sticking with you, talking about how you were live anchoring the AP's coverage for major races for Election Day. And after digesting all that data a week on out now, what are the big takeaways here? What are Democrats looking at? I know we were just talking about all this back and forth over caving for the shutdown, kind of like taking some of the wind out of their sails that they just got from
Right.
those election returns.
Well, there's been some conversation about that of like, hey, we just had these big wins in these elections and now we can't seem to agree about how the shutdown stuff should go. Like, what does that look like for us as a party? But certainly coming out of the early November off-year elections, there was a lot of positivity among Democrats of saying, okay, well, this is how we did in the first major round of elections since Donald Trump's return to the White House. This is going to bode potentially very well for us going into the midterms, where we all know traditionally it isn't a good showing for the party that holds the presidency at that time. But given the shutdown politics, given how there is a lot of runway between now and those midterms, yes, these are good for Democrats. Yes, they can fundraise off of these wins. Also, Prop 50 out in California, that was another win for Democrats, backed by Governor Gavin Newsom, the redistricting effort there to add seats to the Democratic delegation in that state. So all of those things come together, but certainly when real-time issues come up, when the shutdown comes up, when will be other things where Democrats might disagree over the next year plus, or about a year really until we get to the general election, then they can still look back at these wins, but they will have to take stock of what's right in front of them too.
Can we talk about 2028 really quick?
We can always talk about 2028.
2026 is fine, but 2028,
Let's go ahead and
obviously,
spin way forward.
let's just jump ahead to the next big one. We have seen a stream of big-name Democrats, national Democrats, coming through South Carolina this past year. Governors, Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey was going to come through the state earlier this week, but of course the votes in the Senate took him away. So we all know what's going on here. Everyone's talking about momentum
just
for
like South
2026.
Carolina. I don't
I mean,
know
who
what you're talking
doesn't?
about.
Mild weather.
But this is all obviously a ramp up to 2028,
Right.
where South Carolina is an early voting state in the presidential primary, Democrats
Right.
and Republicans. But specifically for the Democrats, what's the latest on the Democratic National Committee's moves to solidify that early voting calendar for 2028?
So recently, the Rules and Bylaws Committee of the DNC, which is that body that helps set the calendar and deals with how voting is going to happen for primary elections, they recently set a deadline of January 16th for the states that want to compete in that early window where South Carolina's primary happens, the window before Super Tuesday. States that want to participate in that have until mid-January to apply. And then thereafter will be a usually pretty lengthy process to wade through those applications and figure out exactly what the order of states is going to be. South Carolina, which obviously went first last time for Democrats, has made it clear that they intend to argue to keep that seat. But there are plenty of other states that are going to be doing the same. And new DNC Chairman Ken Martin, this will be his first round of primary elections and caucuses since becoming chair, has said that he is very willing to perhaps completely scramble that process, just like they did in 2024, when it was Joe Biden who said, okay, I would like South Carolina to go first, and we all kind of know what happened from there. So we're in this application process. States are going to be making their arguments. The one thing that we do know is that states in the early window will come from all quadrants of the United States. So there'll be North and South, West and East, all represented in that window. There has also been an argument that, like South Carolina is, among those states should be heavily African-American populated states, with Democrats saying this is a reliable spot for us in terms of voters. We need to make sure that we keep that in mind. And that is something that we've continued to hear with some consistency. So I think that will bear out. Whether exactly that's South Carolina or maybe one of our neighbors like North Carolina or Georgia, those are both states that often come up in that conversation. So it is always a long process to actually get that calendar set. We all remember it from last time, how even though we knew South Carolina had been early, we didn't know if we'd be first or not. So it'll be quite a while until we hear, but at least in January, those applications will be formalized and then they can really debate.
Have you heard of any concern from Democrats in South Carolina about I mean, obviously, we probably won't be first again, but we'll at least hopefully be first in the South. Because when you look at Georgia, North Carolina, purple states, some swing states, they already play a large role in the general election, where South Carolina always solidly Republican just based on how we have the votes. I mean, it's not changing anytime soon. So that really does give us the advantage when it comes to the primary, as well as our track record here in terms of picking nominees. So have you heard any concerns about us possibly just losing out in the early voting period?
And from South Carolinians, like Democrats within our state, seem to be fairly positive to me in terms of being able to keep that. We know how to do this. It's a very affordable state to campaign. Those other two states that you mentioned, much bigger media markets. It's harder to get around. It's harder to get in front of voters, both on TV or digitally, kind of not as much of a difference, but in person or on TV. So South Carolina Democrats seem pretty confident that they'll be able to maintain that spot. But the argument from outside the state, from a lot of other places, not just North Carolina and Georgia, but places saying, South Carolina, yeah, you aren't a purple state. You don't send statewide Democrats or side with Democratic presidential candidates in a general election. Why would we continue to come to you for this primary process? That's certainly going to be part of the argument that we hear from the other states for sure.
Maayan, we'll get to some local elections in a minute. Again, it was an off year, not too many, but there were some special Statehouse elections. But I want to keep with this federal look and look at the U.S. Supreme Court, which just heard arguments against the Trump tariffs involving President Trump using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to levy these tariffs on our adversaries and our allies alike, whether it's for fentanyl or other issues with the trade deficits, et cetera. We know that there's been a lot of impacts in terms of trade agreements and who's buying what, especially when it comes to soybeans for farmers in South Carolina and across America. It's really redefined who's the market, essentially, because China said, no, we're not buying soybeans anymore. There's been a deal that's been reached between us and China recently to change that. But you've done some reporting on that with farmers in South Carolina. What did you find, and how is that progressing right now?
Soybeans are an incredibly important crop here in the state, top commodity, top export. Most farmers grow soybeans. They harvest soybeans along with other crops like cotton, corn, wheat, et cetera. It's been a really, really tough couple of years for farmers in the state, not just soybean farmers, but farmers overall. They've experienced some pretty terrible drought. And when we focus on soybean farmers, the only soybean processing crush plant closed in South Carolina. It was the only one in the town of Kershaw, very, very small town in Lancaster County. But you had folks that would come not just from all over the state, but North Carolina and Georgia. That caused a huge economic gut punch for a lot of soybean farmers. And then, of course, when China altogether stopped buying soybeans as a result of the trade war. And as you mentioned, China has restarted. Reporting has suggested that it's not quite the same volume that they were buying at before. So it's been a real economic gut punch for farmers in South Carolina, especially the ones who I've talked to who are looking at cutting back. There have been farmers who have sold their land, whether to business or housing developments that we've seen popping up across the state. Mental health is a serious issue amongst the farming community, and so we have seen that play out a little bit on this last couple of years. But it's been really tough. I spoke with Hugh Weathers, the commissioner of the Department of Agriculture, who talked about ways that they are trying to help farmers, especially with soybeans. That's expanding port business, soybean storage, which is a huge issue in the state, did not realize, also tapping into their agribusiness fund. They're also potentially looking at really asking the legislature to step in, something like kind of a tax credit, sort of safety net piece of legislation. I think it's still being worked out. Those conversations are still ongoing. But we've seen how farm aid bills have played out in the legislature before. And so this will be a kind of an interesting conversation or debate if it does happen this year. But I think there is a lot of pressure right now. The farming industry is obviously very important, very, very vital to the state. And farmers are being very, very vocal right now about the issues that they're going through. Some of them do support the tariffs, but I don't think, in speaking with them, they did not love the fact that, perhaps we went so far, we cut off an entire country that was the largest importer of one crop. And I mean, obviously, that hurt nationwide. But here in South Carolina, it's especially been difficult.
I was going to say, this comes on the heels of last year with Hurricane Helene really disrupting a lot of growth, farming too. And there was money in the budget, right, to help restore some of that? I'm trying to remember.
Yes, timber especially, and that's another piece, that's another part of the industry that has also been really, really hurting. So we have seen, the state kind of help out. But I think the drought especially was really hurtful for farmers in the state.
So let's pivot and get a little bit lower too when we come to these races in the Statehouse, and we saw a handful of special election races. What's going on with those? Who was up and what happened there? There's still Republican supermajorities in the House. These didn't change anything.
No, and these will not change at all. The Republican supermajorities in the House and the Senate are not going away. I think the top headline is former Senator Lee Bright is returning to
He's back.
He's returning to the Senate next year, Spartanburg Republican. He'll fill the unexpired term of Senator Roger Nutt, who of course announced his resignation after an Alzheimer's diagnosis. But we do have a handful of new faces who will be coming into the House as well. Most of them, again, coming from Republican-leaning districts. So R.J. May, his term will be filled. There's a December 23rd general election. It is a Republican-leaning district, so we'll see someone replace him. Bobby Cox, who was going to run for Roger Nutt's seat, now also has resigned from his House seat, so he will have a replacement. And then if you want to even consider a race to be competitive, the race to fill the unexpired term of former state representative Chris Murphy will be it, and that takes place on January 6th. There is a runoff between two Republicans, a Democrat, down in Low Country. It's still a Republican-leaning district, but it's closer than the others. I think what's also important that you both know to keep in mind is these are off-year elections, very, very low turnout, and all these folks are going to have to run, except for Lee Bright, all these folks are going to have to run again next year.
Immediately,
right. So we could have a brand new crop of faces, even for those seats as well.
Promise to learn their names. I will.
We're all going to try.
Meg, I know you're a national politics reporter who is based in South Carolina. We appreciate that. We love that you're outside of the bubble in D.C. But you know the state and its politics very well. You've covered it for years. Decades, dare I say, 20 years of the AP.
Yeah, 20
Congratulations.
years. Thank you.
But we have a governor's race now, wide open, 5 Republicans and 2 Democrats. We'll talk about the Democrats in a minute, but I want to ask you about what the Republican side is shaping up right now. We talked about Congresswoman Mace and some of the ramifications of her actions with that vote in the discharge petition, but we're getting closer to June. It's still less than 7 months away. It's still far. The holidays are here. No one's really paying attention. But how do you see this race shaping up with these 5 Republicans right now?
It has been kind of difficult for me when I talk to my editors and they ask me like, okay, so the South Carolina governor's race, like what's going on? And I kind of like lay the land out for them a bit. And they're like, okay, well, yeah, June is really far. So I don't think that we have to like rush out reporting necessarily. But when you take stock, I mean, a lot of these contenders right now are still introducing themselves. They are trying to do the thing that you do in a primary, which is differentiate yourself among the competitors with whom you agree on a lot of bigger picture issues. But you have to make your argument to voters, why you? Why should you be picked? And so it's a name ID game at this point. We have seen some issues come to the fore. Most of the candidates, if not all, have had a conversation in their own events about judicial reform and criminal justice. Those are issues that we heard a lot during the presidential campaign from last year, and so we're seeing those emerge as major places. That's very significant, especially when you have the current Attorney General as one of those candidates, Alan Wilson, and he's arguing that he is the one who has the most experience in that lane because that's something professionally he's been doing for a long time. But for the other contenders, they're really, just trying to introduce themselves but put themselves in a different context. Clearly, Lieutenant Governor Pam Evatt has been elected statewide, so she does have that level of I already represent all of South Carolina, but they haven't seen her as governor. They've seen her as a very loyal supporter of Governor McMaster while she has been in office alongside him and run with him in different campaigns. But necessarily seeing her as the chief executive of the state, that's something that she is really trying to make that argument. And for Congressman Norman and for Congresswoman Mace, same thing. They represent their own places, their portions, their districts of the state, but really trying to say, but now I want to be known and lead all of South Carolina. It's just a mind shift for a lot of primary voters. And so those are ways that the candidates basically have to think about coming out for the first time and really introducing themselves to people on a different side of the state than the one that may know them a bit better in their district.
Yeah, there's a lot of fireworks going on there too. We don't have enough time to get into all that too. We have 3 minutes to do a whole show on that. Maayan, I want to talk about the Democrats. We just saw another Democrat jump in that race. Tell us about that and how difficult it is for a Democrat to win statewide statewide in South Carolina.
Yeah, that was State Representative Jermaine Johnson from Richland County, the second Democrat to jump in behind Mullins McLeod, the Charleston attorney. How difficult? Very difficult. This is a red state. We all know that. But this is also a massive election that is going to probably turn out more voters than, we're used to. This is the first wide open governor's race that we would have had in over a decade. You also have the other piece, which is Senator Lindsey Graham is up for re-election. And if we've seen anything from his previous run, he can get more votes or more people turn out to vote in that election than they do in other statewide elections. And so I think because of those two things combined, it is going to be a tougher year for Democrats. Now, I think what maybe Democrats will see as success is if they can narrow that margin that was created back when Governor McMaster won in 2022 against Democrat Joe Cunningham. But blowout. But it is tough. What can Democrats do? I mean, it's obviously going to take not kind of getting into your silos, not being super narrow, talking to as many voters as possible, going into places perhaps in the state that Democrats may not always be used to. But again, you're competing with Republicans who one is going to get the Trump endorsement, a lot more money. So it's going to be tough for Democrats.
Yeah, especially with Senator Graham, who already has Trump's endorsement, too. It's going to be interesting to see them all fighting for that, too.
Yeah, and I think if Senator Lindsey Graham wins his primary, that kind of opens up several months for Trump to come back for perhaps somebody else as well.
Bring him up on stage. Less than a minute left there, Meg. I want to touch on redistricting. That's been an issue on the campaign trail with Congressman Ralph Norman saying we should be redistricting, getting rid of the 6th congressional district where Democrat Jim Clyburn has held on to power there, the only Democrat in the 7-member congressional delegation for the House. Is there any possibility that will happen? We haven't seen any movement on this at the state level when it comes to redistricting the maps like we've seen in other states. You talked about Prop 50 in California.
I think we're a long way away from that actually happening here in South Carolina. And for Representative Norman, he's in the governor's race. And so that allows him to pick an issue that has had a lot of attention nationally to bring it home to South Carolina and maybe differentiate himself like we were just talking about in that GOP primary. But I think in terms of something like that actually moving through the legislature here, I think that would take a lot. And I'm not sure what the appetite would be when they come back in January.
Yeah, I mean, I echoed the same thing. I think perhaps there is a map that's deep down in the vault right now, but that is a tough fight. And, Congressman Clyburn is pretty well respected by even some Republicans here in South Carolina. So, while he is still in office, I think that's an even tougher lift as well.
Yeah, it's helpful to have him here when there's a Democrat in the White House and vice versa for everyone else,
Members of Congress from both parties have told me that about how that works.
That was Friends of the Pod AP national politics reporter Meg Kinnard and South Carolina Public Radio Statehouse and political reporter Maayan Schechter. Thank you. Gosh, big names here. Welcome to the wind down section. Our little break from the news. We're glad you're here, along with A.T. Shire, lead podcast producer.
Hello. Yep.
Hey, Eagles won on Monday.
Go Eagles.
It was that game, and forcing me to stay up late was one of the most deeply unenjoyable experiences of my life.
Who'd they beat?
They beat the Packers at Packers, and they won 10-7, which should be like the end of the first quarter, I would say.
Strong.
0-0 at half. It was brutal to have to stay up. If I had a fitness tracker on my body during that game, it would have just tried to call an ambulance 3 or 4 times just because I was seething with rage. It was awful.
I love that.
And they're going to make me stay up on Sunday night to watch the Lions at Eagles. And I'm just like, give me a 1 p.m. game.
Sports. It sounds so enjoyable.
Put me out of my misery by 4 p.m., please. Come on.
Yeah. Oh, my
Golly.
gosh. Yeah, give them time to decompress before the big taping on Monday.
Anyway, guys, speaking of Monday. Folks, this is a light heads up that maybe the show might be a little late because right now, the little baby Rena, LBR, she is at home with the stomach bug.
Oh.
So I am sort of quarantining away from my family in studio with Gavin. And so
unwillingly exposing me. I know you're quarantined, but I have to imagine we're covered in germs right now.
We were recording a day early on Thursday because we planned to take a family vacation, including my parents and everyone, down to Savannah this weekend. And that's out the window.
Charleston's cousin.
My parents are still going. We're staying back.
No.
I'm staring down the barrel of a Friday just holding a baby who's throwing up on me, okay?
Well, that's good.
So at least we get this episode in a little early. So if next Tuesday comes around and you don't see a lead, I'm sure there'll be a disclaimer, but it's probably because your old boy AT is not feeling well.
Yeah, it will be like when you guys did it when I was a little sick under the weather, but
Correct.
I'll have to do something different for that. But
Yes, it's something people actually enjoy.
I have not been to Savannah.
Savannah?
I've been to New Orleans. Charleston's rowdy
It's right
stepbrother.
If you've been to New Orleans and you've been to Charleston, sort of
a
right
little bit
down
there.
that
That's
middle.
what I hear.
I really enjoy Savannah.
I hear good things.
None of it is like falling into the ocean or the
Oh.
pluff mud.
Well, that's
you know
not,
what I mean?
That's not authentic then.
Which I think is a good plus for it. It's a fun town. It has one of my favorite restaurants in the world. We spoke about restaurants before. The Grey.
Fuddruckers.
The Grey. I've been to
Margaritaville.
Fuddruckers one time.
Back in the 90s,
It
baby.
was the 90s. I was a
heydays.
child.
I was there once
when
too.
the size of a burger spoke to me. You know what I mean?
It appeared in a vision.
I was like, they
It
make
spoke to
them
me.
that big? Okay, I got to go. Yeah, the Grey down in Savannah, that's a great restaurant. But
Okay.
Gavin, what do you think of this look at parenthood where it's basically just constantly having a low-grade sinus infection and then dealing with whatever other viscera and liquids come out of your baby?
Yeah, so of course I can not
sell is a hard
relate in
sell.
any way. Like
It's
I
a
always
hard
mention
sell.
every now and then, I sometimes stay in bed all day on Sunday, and I think of all my friends, especially my brother Nick with 3 boys, and
Everyone
the age of
who's
8.
You go
and I
through your
think-
enemy list,
and I
everyone
think,
who's wronged you.
And I'm like, I put the lipstick on like from Billy Madison.
Just like Billy Madison. Yeah.
No, and then I think, oh, it's so quiet here, and I have no responsibilities other than my baby plants. And
It's
no,
so much
but
screaming.
But this conversation that we're having about poor little baby Rena,
LBR. Yeah.
reminds me of this. I guess this TikTok thing, this social media thing that's going around. It's like again, I only see TikToks that make it onto Instagram.
Correct.
I'm not on TikTok because
Like an adult.
I'm already
Yeah.
doom scrolling
No
way
more,
too much.
too many algorithms as
I'll talk about that in a minute, but but there's this. I don't know if it's a challenge or whatever, and it's a girl,
Oh, I
and her
know.
and her boyfriend's like playing a video game, and she's like, "Hey, babe," and she doesn't say anything. She just has like, I guess,
See if
milk in
they're
her
ready.
mouth or something
See
like
if
that.
they're ready.
And then she like just spits up on them,
Yeah.
to see if they're ready for a baby. And I'm like, oh my god, I'm so glad
That-
I have nothing to do with any of that.
That is the
nonsense.
first month. That is the first 30 days.
yeah, that sounds like easier than what
then
you're
it
going
is
through.
over. Yeah. Yeah, once they're walking, then you're really in the weeds,
A
you know?
goo goo gaga.
A
baby.
goo goo, and also, quite frankly, gaga, folks. Yeah, so like
That
Rena,
baby's talking.
she's talking. Yeah, she'll hand you her shoes and say outside to you. You know, like she's a woman on the go. She talks.
Outside peasant.
She hands you her shoes to put on her feet for her and says,
Oh my gosh.
outside. Yeah.
Okay, she's getting to iconic status already as a 2-year-old.
She is pretty epically rude and mean. I would say I would qualify her as my bully.
Well, I wonder where she gets it from. Is this nature versus nurture, folks? Weigh in.
I can't tell me what. I don't understand what you're getting at. Anyway, folks, wish me good luck on my parenting journey.
Happiness
Join me.
and health and light for AT, everybody.
Please, yes. All your healing vibrations, send them towards me. If you have any strong crystals that could help in this situation, let me know.
AT is surrounded by crystals right now, guys. We just got through the full moon. Mercury is in retrograde, so we're all on our tippy toes around
It was
here.
a beaver moon. Anyway, Gavin, say goodbye.
Oh, my goodness. Thanks for listening, y'all. We love hearing from you guys. Give us a shout, 803-563-7169. We can talk about any number of things we just talked about or throw some curveballs. We love that. You can also stay up to date with the latest news on SCETV.org and SouthCarolinaPublicRadio.org, and don't forget to support your local newspapers. The South Carolina Lead is a production of South Carolina Public Radio. Our producer is A.T. Shire. Amy Crouch is our supervising producer. Sean Birch is our executive producer. This podcast is produced with support from PRX and is made possible in part by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, as well as listener contributions to the ETV Endowment of South Carolina. Thank you. For the South Carolina Lead, I'm Gavin Jackson. Be well, South Carolina. You're giving Catherine O'Hara 90s vibes right now.
Yes. Generational money, that house, how could they?